Welcome back to Precisely Nowhere. Super excited to have this guest with us today. I met her through work, through my 9 to 5, and she's amazing and has all of these great side hustles and passion projects. So very excited to dive in. She is a freelance photographer and a former professional soccer player. So she's just a jack of all trades. Is that the saying?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I'm like, my brain is still turning on. Excited to have Ashton Miller with us here today. She is going to tell us a little bit about who she is, where she grew up, and where she's currently based, so that we all get a sense of who she is as we dive in. So Ashton, handing it off to you.
Thank you, Nisa. I'm super excited to chat with you and share hopefully some insight with your audience. I'm Ashton Miller. As Anissa said, I grew up in Michigan in a heavily sports background. I grew up figure skating and playing soccer and wound up at Duke University playing soccer, which eventually led to me getting drafted and playing in Chicago professionally, and then moving to Prague and signing with the team there, getting to play professionally abroad and, compete in Champions League and do some really awesome things. And then decided my time was done there and retired and started to get into the corporate world and picked up a 9 to 5 in New York, where I started in the agency world, which is ultimately where I met Anissa. And through kind of my journey in the agency world, started to explore things on the side, such as photography, which has kind of grown from super side passion to full-on side hustle. And I'm doing a lot of creative projects as well. And that's my 5-second summary.
Which is a great summary. I always forget that you also figure skated. There's just so many talents over here. I love it. Speaking of photography, because I know that's a more recent love of yours, when did you decide you wanted to pursue freelance photography?
Honestly, I think in the past year, really, I started taking it more seriously, really, when I moved to New York. And for me, that meant setting up intentional shoots with friends and taking pictures that were outside of just like my daily life. So I shifted kind of from street photography to portraiture and trying to really perfect the technique behind the camera. And I think slowly but surely that built a lot of momentum, and I fell more and more in love with it and got better and better, and eventually started having kind of people reach out to me about taking photos for them. I got to the point where I was taking up enough time where I started charging for it for, people who weren't my closest friends and family. And I think as soon as I kind of found it starting to be like a viable source of income and something that was more than just a hobby, I started to really kind of consider doing it more seriously. And that has kind of really happened in the last year in terms of, pursuing jobs and thinking about, could this be my full-time eventually? Yeah, I think there is also a bit of, this has been my passion. I didn't want to taint it by making it full-time. So I've been super cautious about kind of how I approach this, because I don't want it to be just like another thing I do. I really want it to be something that stays exciting for me. And so I've been trying to walk that line in this year of accepting more jobs and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I totally relate to you in the like having a passion and almost wanting to protect it in a way of, and I don't know about you, but when like with the podcast, I feel like I have this thing where I have like creative control over it. And it's so nice to get to choose who I interview and what I do and what I talk about. And
Exactly.
It sounds like you're being really intentional too with even the jobs that you're taking, which is great because it is a passion of yours. So you want to protect it like a baby almost.
Right. Trying.
That is exciting though to hear about you doing more like paid work, and your baby is growing, which is I'm very excited to continue to see. Ashton, we will plug all of her socials and everything later in the episode, but she has a great portfolio. So if anyone's in the city, hit her up. Or I'm sure, do you ever travel for?
I've done upstate New York and stuff that's in with like driving range, or if I'm already traveling somewhere, but I haven't intentionally traveled for a project yet.
Okay, yet. So
yes.
So What skills did you gain as a former professional soccer player that have contributed to your success as a photographer or a person in general?
The biggest one that comes to mind is just goal setting. Like, I think as an athlete, you're really good at working hard. You're really good at, time management because you have to be to succeed at what you're doing. And so I think though, like, how you actually invest your time and effort is really important. And like that really comes down to goal setting. And I guess as an athlete, it was always a practice of like doing daily, weekly goals that ladder up to these larger goals, right? So I think it breaks down the process of something feeling really nebulous and hard to approach. And if I can kind of like do the math and think backwards, like, okay, in a year from now, I want to get my first paid photography job. And what am I doing, in the next month to do that? Maybe I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot for 3 different friends and send 3 different emails to companies that I want to shoot for, whatever it is. And then what that is daily of like, I'm going to read 5 blogs about photography and whatnot. So I think that's been the biggest one because starting something new is so nebulous and scary. And so it's really nice to try and put tangible goals and things that you can accomplish. I think that feedback loop of accomplishing something also and like letting yourself acknowledge that you accomplished it is really powerful in this journey that you're like completely self-defining.
Yeah, it feels powerful, even just you saying it. And I think that's something that sometimes people get so caught up, myself included, where you're working on this thing, but really acknowledging your like milestones and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you are venturing into something new, and that in itself is an accomplishment. So
Right.
I love the idea of goal setting and being intentional with your time. It's easier said than done, but I think
Yeah.
it's very possible if you can set those goals and then try to stay
Right.
focused on even accomplishing those at the
Right.
onset.
I think with that, like the role of feedback is so important and like allowing yourself to like feedback yourself of like, okay, yesterday I didn't accomplish any of my goals, but like today I'm going to try again. And like instead of kind of ignoring your goals and being like, shit, I didn't accomplish one, so I'm just like not going to look at them for the week. It's like, how do you feedback yourself more frequently so you have, you can reset, reapproach, like re-strategize like the next day versus waiting the next month.
Yeah, and giving yourself some grace as you go along
Yes,
because it's so
of
easy
course.
to have all of these ambitions and get maybe sidetracked and then get discouraged if you don't stay
Yeah,
on track. So great
yeah.
advice. I am loving all of this advice. And how did you navigate switching careers? Like, so you going from being a professional soccer player to now working in advertising, and you're juggling your corporate job with your passion project.
hmm
How do you find balance?
Okay. Switching careers, I feel like I'll take that question first. I think really it came down to like using people in my network who were willing to like give advice and, listening to their journeys and trying to implement some of the things that they told me. Like that's how I got into advertising was connecting to a bunch of mentors and eventually aligning on advertising being a feasible path that felt like I had the skill sets to approach plus the network helped me get there. Did that answer the first part of your question? I'm like,
You
it
did.
was
That
kind of
was a
like a
great
two-part.
answer. I know, I realized it after I asked, but I was like, those are 2 questions. That, yeah, tapping into your network and, leveraging the people that you already know, or even reaching out, it sounds like, to people that you may
Yeah,
not know to get that advice and help you when you're trying to navigate into like a new industry.
yeah,
And
exactly.
then,
Because when you're navigating into a new industry, like someone has to take a chance on you. So it's like having someone or getting to know that trusts your potential enough is like the best, like the only really thing you can rely on. So I think it's really about like those interpersonal connections in that transition period. And like same with photography, where I think my first paid job was actually for like a Nike event. It was because I was friends with the people who put on the event. I was friends with the yoga studio they were collaborating with, and I kind of connected the dots for them. And at the same time was pushing the fact that I was a photographer. And so it was like this like alignment of friends being like, okay, we'll see.
It's always, I tell people all the time, a lot of the times it's who you know. And if
Yeah,
are you like a good person that someone can rely on?
right.
Uh, and it helps to have both of those. And juggling your corporate job with your passion project, how do you find
Yeah.
that harmony of saving
Um,
time for your passion, outside of your 9 to 5?
yeah. I'm like, I don't know if I've been doing it that well recently, but I think it's just priorities, right? So it's like the same way you'd plan a date after work is kind of how I've approached, or like, plan to workout class or whatever it is you want to do. I've taken that approach to planning kind of how much time I'm allotting to side hustles and after work. And I think that really ladders up to the goals though, because if I'm like, okay, in 2 weeks, I want to have shot with these two people. It's like, okay, well, I need to plan my shoot for an hour. I need to rent the space, align, like I think having tangible goals really helps actually put time towards things because then you either accomplish it or you don't. But I think it's hard. I mean, the transition period is really hard because you have to invest so much of your personal time in this new thing to even get to a place where it's giving you kind of back what you're putting in.
And just to add on to that, I have like a Google Doc with I do like monthly to-dos at a high level and then break out those when I'm going to actually work on them by
Yeah.
day. And that moves sometimes on something happens and then I have to push something, but
Mm-hmm.
really putting down like on paper what you need to work on is
Mm-hmm.
helpful to make sure you're accomplishing what you want to. It's so easy to get sidetracked with your 9 to 5 or other things, and the day
Yeah.
goes by and you're like, what?
Right. But there's definitely months where I'm like, I'm on a project at work, how advertising is, and I can't put any time towards my side hustle. And that's fine because that's what's paying the bills. And you kind of have to respect that first and foremost. And then there's months where I'm lighter and I'm, almost working more at my side hustle than I am at my real job. So
Yeah,
I think you
I
have to be
love the ebbs and
flexible.
flows.
And I mean, with
Well,
something like photography, like sometimes you get a lot of work and sometimes you don't. So it's not all controlled
yeah,
by you.
it takes time even just to get out there and find new people and projects, and it's not just okay, I'm gonna do this thing tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What advice would you give to your younger self or someone who has a dream but might feel like it's impossible or intimidating? I feel like from knowing you and knowing all that you've accomplished and are accomplishing now, you are great at goal setting and going at advocating for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's really just like I think this was a mentality flip for me, and I've always had it with sports, but in the in this kind of like figuring out my new passion world, it's just like if you want to do something, do it. Like if you want to be a photographer, like you need to feel like you're a photographer and be a photographer before you're asking for that title to be given to you from others. And I kind of found myself in this position of wanting to, do these creative things and be revered as a creative, but I wasn't putting my work out into the world. And so it's like, why am I asking for permission to put my work out? And I started just kind of creating more, sharing more unapologetically. And like through that, like the more I think creative work I've been putting out, the more and more good feedback I've been getting. And then the more and more work I've been getting because people then can see you in that role already. They're like, oh, yeah, she's doing a lot of creative work. I would love to bring her onto this project or as a creative
Yeah.
director or a photographer or whatever. So I think it's really just that flip of like, don't ask for permission, start being the person you want to be, doing things you want to do. And that might take, more financial investment on your end. It might take that, more time without any sort of feedback or reward but it's like without that and without a super stereotypical path, for example, like going to art school, then going to, then becoming an artist or whatever it is, then you kind of need that self-initiation.
Which is so inspiring to hear from you because I get in that. I have this podcast, but you're right. You have to just start walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And that
Yeah,
getting there can be daunting if you're not used to even
totally.
advocating for yourself or sharing, that side of yourself. And I
Yeah,
think it's great advice to just, if you want something, like do it, and we have to go
right.
after it.
There's
Yeah.
also like there's so many people who wanna, like you just said, like you feel like that too, like who want to claim these new identities and do these new things. And so it's like if you feel like you need a buddy, look to your network and be like, who can I do this with? And you feel kind of like a little bit more supported if you have someone else in your corner.
Yeah, and I think you're great at that because I know I've seen from your projects you collaborate with a lot of your friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that is nice because, yeah, it's people that know you and you get to come together and work on this cool creative project.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, I think that also like leads to a lot more work. Like if you're doing a cool project and you pull in, my friend who's a graphic designer, my other friend who's a model, and my other friend who makes clothes, I don't know, whatever, however you can like highlight your people's special talents, then like when they go and have some project, they're gonna want to pull you back in.
So, what are the top 3 to 5 lessons you learned in this past year? And it can also be recently, it doesn't have to be like going back to a year. That can be personally, professionally, as a freelance photographer. Is there anything that comes top of mind that you've learned that you're like, this is something that would be valuable to pass along and share?
I think the first one that came to mind, which I don't know if it's like the top learning, but it's a learning, was I put on this big project. I created a gallery in Miami, and I think we just took on way too much. Because of that, it didn't allow me to fully enjoy every second of the process because I was stressed because we were doing too much. So I think like really narrowing in on, like my dad always used to say, like you can do two out of three things really, really well, and you need to decide what those two things are. And so I think kind of taking that same mentality to creative projects of like, oh, what are we like really doing well, really feeling proud about, and then what's kind of like a nice to have that we could leave if it's too much, or maybe it comes together easily. And so just staying focused on the goal and not getting too excited and spreading yourself too thin. I think another one I'm working on, which I don't think I have down pat, is just setting boundaries in terms of what my role in creative projects are. As you know, I'm on the account side at work, so I think I tend to kind of project manage, which is not what I want to be doing in my creative side hustles, but it's like a role I naturally take on. And so I've been working on trying to only take on things that feel really good, because that's why I'm doing these things, is to feel good. So yeah, that's a work in progress.
Which is so I can see how that can be hard because I mean, I'm a project manager. Ashton knows I'm a project manager in my day-to-day 9 to 5. So I automatically fall into that role in your side hustle. And you're right, when your persona can be different than what naturally like comes to you, if that's not something that
Mm-hmm.
you're passionate about, and finding those boundaries so that way you can make sure that you're doing something that feeds your soul and you're proud of at the end of the day is great advice to give.
Yeah.
I love
Um,
that.
I guess my third one can be something I was reaffirmed of, that just like you have to keep play at the forefront. And like for me at least, that's what is fueling all of this. Like this like curiosity I feel when I'm taking on a creative project, and it's kind of like uncharted territory every single time. As it becomes more serious, it's like how can I emphasize that even more and just make sure I'm injecting laughter and fun and joy into all of these projects that are becoming serious, but grounding myself in why I'm doing it. I think I've been successful in that, in collaborating with friends who make me feel really good, and taking on projects that feel really good. And so I think that's one that I'm always fighting to remember and emphasize in everything I do.
And I think that's a super important one, especially if you're taking something that's your passion that already brings you joy and you're trying to level it up, is keeping those elements in it that still bring you that joy. So that way you can, ideally you want to retain that. How do you retain that? Is it working with people you know are going to bring that energy and reinforce that, like-mindedness of this is serious but also fun, or do you take that on yourself to try to make sure that like joy and good vibes and energy is like there throughout your projects?
Yeah, I think definitely I'm not willing to work with people who don't make me feel like that. That's a hard boundary, but that's not really the only thing that keeps that going. I think it's definitely looking at myself. Like, days are stressful. Going from your job to your side hustle to your side hustle is like not always a calm, exciting journey. I think curiosity for me has always been a good way to like reframe something of like, okay, I'm shooting this. Like, I shot a bris this year, which is like a Jewish ceremony where they circumcise the male like a few days after birth. And so I was like, okay, this is like, instead of I'm shooting some religious ceremony, it's going to be kind of stuffy and whatnot. It was like, okay, how can I capture the joy in this and understand what is so special about this ceremony and learn something new about a new culture? And like, I don't know. So it's like, how can you challenge yourself to get curious about every scenario that you're getting yourself in? And if you can't get
Yeah.
curious about it, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. I don't know.
I think that's a really interesting approach, and I want to steal it because I think from someone who is also naturally curious about a lot of things, having that approach of yeah, how can you challenge yourself to be curious and find these new interesting angles that are personal to you? I think that's where you can find the magic in, your
Mm-hmm.
passion and keep it fun and very personal to you.
Mm-hmm.
I am definitely gonna steal this one for sure, and lots of other things. Um,
Thanks.
so I know that in your personal passion projects, you also have found ways to continue to support women's soccer, and you had the project Make Space, and a lot of it's tied to making space for other women. So why is it important to you to continue to support women's soccer in your passion projects and side hustles?
Yeah, I think it's double-edged sword where I think at one end, I think women's sports are really driving the charge for women at large. Like, they're pushing on kind of like the subconscious of society, of like, why wouldn't you support a women's sports game? Have you even tried to appreciate it? Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of like deep-rooted subconscious like biases that are being challenged to change through women's sports, and firsthand experiencing the sexism and everything that comes along with playing women's sport. It's definitely just like a point where I have personal experience where I also on the other end have a really like respected voice to talk about it. So it's like it's a system where I already have the respect and therefore have the network and the resources to actually say something. And so it feels like a perfect little combo for me.
And I mean, I played soccer when I was younger, travel soccer, but I have, I'm a woman as well, and you definitely see the inequalities between women's sports and men's sports, even in just the pay and the recognition and the airtime and lots of things that people don't necessarily think about, especially
Right.
if you're not a woman and aren't used to having to deal with the inequalities between genders. So I
Yeah.
think that it's wonderful that you're taking time and finding ways in your passions to continue to shed light on issues that have been around for decades but are still important to talk about and using your voice. So I'm so proud of you, Ashton. So what inspired you to turn your side hustles into skill sets. I know that that's something you have on your website, and I think that it is genius and a unique way to like message that.
I'm just not someone who's satisfied staying in a 9 to 5 for forever. And so I think I'm also hyper competitive with myself. And so it's like, why not be really good at these things and see where they can go? Because I think if they do become something I'm really good at, like, I think I could get more joy out of doing them at all times versus my 9 to 5. So I think, yeah, it's just like a challenge. Why not try and see if you can fall in love with something again? Because I think that was what
Yeah.
soccer was for me for a long time, was something I loved and was able to do, for a job. And why not find what's next? If my 9 to 5 is not what is next, then what is?
Yeah. And it goes back to your staying curious. And I think it's very admirable. And I love that you say, find something that you can fall in love with next. I think that evokes playfulness and also this childhood like spirit for me at least of, you
Mm-hmm.
have these passions and yeah, why not dream a little bit and see if you can take something and, who knows what it's gonna turn into. But
Right. That's kind of the fun of it, right? It's like a 9 to 5, your path, I work really hard, I might get that promotion. But with something like this, it's like it could be, my I could become a big time photographer. I could just do it as a side hustle. Take photos of my
yeah,
friends. I don't know.
yeah, you never know until you just start doing it and put yourself out there and, believe in the dream because it's so easy to do something and then not really believe in yourself and take those
Yeah.
chances. But what do you have to lose,
Yeah.
I'm saying this out loud so it soaks and sinks into myself as well because talking to you has just made me realize it's so easy to do something, but you have to keep pushing. And if that's something you want, to build and
Yeah.
take from a side hustle to something bigger, which is okay if it's not something bigger, but
Right.
I think it's great to have those ambitions. So, what are you most excited about for this upcoming year, personally and professionally, or either or? And that can be with freelance photography. Like, is there anything that you're really looking forward to? Do you have any projects on the horizon that or any goal or dream projects that you're hoping to work on?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one I'm currently working on is I'm trying to shoot a kind of more art photography series that I want to show in a gallery. And I am, just shot again this Sunday for it. And I'm slowly but surely trying to chip away and land on something I feel really good about. I think otherwise it would be fun to shoot for a bigger client. Maybe like an advertising campaign or something that is a little bit more high stakes. So I think those are two goals.
I mean, those are great goals. At the gallery, are you thinking something in New York City or
Yes.
something?
Yeah,
Okay.
something in New York. I think I have enough connections in this space that I can make it happen. So we're working on it.
I I believe in the cause, and I think you can
Thanks.
definitely make that happen. I can't wait. You'll have to keep us posted so that I can come back to the city and go to your gallery opening.
Absolutely. Follow up episode. Yeah.
Right? I am planning to do follow-up episodes with all of the people that I'm interviewing, so we can stay in touch. So both of those are very great goals to have. The advertising or bigger client is also exciting. Taking
Yeah.
challenging yourself to work with, a client and there's lots of stakeholders involved. So
Yeah.
finding that balance, but still keeping your creative passion and that curious and fun side. I feel like both of those things are going to happen for you, so I can't wait to see them come to life.
Well, thank you. Me too.
Yeah, of course. And so, what are your top three favorite products? or things right now? This can be,
Products.
yeah,
Hmm.
share some tips or wisdom. This can be personally related to photography, just your top three favorite things right now. They also don't have to be a product. It could be an app, it can be a
Okay.
sunblock.
I know, I'm like, brain is running wild. That's a broad prompt. Okay, so I think I've been loving ClearSpace, which is an app. I don't know if it's in other cities, but you can rent a studio for whatever you might want it for really cheap, and you can do it like I've booked one at like midnight for 7 a.m. the next morning. It's super
Wow.
easy. Kind of think like Airbnb, but for studio spaces and just for however many hours you want it for. Um, what
Oh,
other
that's great. A
products?
great tip.
Um, I always, my favorite thing to shoot on is my film camera. So it's an old Canon A1. So I'm going to stay true to that product. And then I don't know if I have a third one. Just leave it at
That's
that.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
your AirPods maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Your AirPods. I love my AirPods. I'm like you know, they're an essential
yeah,
part of my day today.
of course.
I love that your old film camera. And is that what you use for most of your projects?
Depends on the client and whatnot. I feel like most clients don't want to shoot with film. But in my personal projects, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like there's just a different quality to film that's
Yeah.
different from digital.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't want this interview to end. I have enjoyed our catching up, and I am so excited for everyone to get to learn more about you and just, see where your journey takes you with your photography and your side hustles. Can you tell listeners where they can find you so you can plug
Yes.
anything that you'd like to plug?
Um, I think the easiest way to contact me is through my Instagram at ashmill44. And my website where you can see most of my work is millerashton.com. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Keeping it easy.
Hmm. Well, thank
I
you
love
for the
that.
time. This has been awesome.
I love that we're
Okay.
getting to collaborate
I
in our
know. It's so
personal
fun.
passion projects. I hope it's not the last time.
Yeah. And thanks for taking initiative and doing your thing. It's awesome.
Of,
I'm excited to
of
see where this
course.
journey takes you.
I'm so glad I got to catch up with Ashton, and I can't wait to visit her gallery in person in New York City one day. I will definitely keep everyone posted that's listening in case you find yourself in New York City or are one of my listeners that live in the area. I feel very lucky that I get to meet awesome people at work and build genuine connections with them. And now I'm getting to collab with some of them outside of my 9 to 5 and share our passions with one another. So I am very grateful for Ashton for talking to us. And I hope you all are enjoying the guest interview episodes. There are many more to come. And thank you for listening. Until next week, I love you all. Talk soon.
Music and editing done by Marco. You can find him at midnight, MIDNITE_mind80 on Instagram for more of his work.